Hello and welcome to sim.bc, where right now it's 17 past 1 in the evening or in the early morning, depending on how you view it. Just coming back home from work, have a bit of a tea set up here for me, yeah? And a checklist of what we're gonna go through as we're progressing through this. Now, what you are listening to is a podcast because I tend to do one of those once a month to just cover some topics that I feel might need a bit more information towards them, because even though I might do some raw material daily, there are some things that kind of needs a deeper understanding, a deeper perspective, so to say, a deep dive into the entire conversation. And 10 to 20 minutes just won't do that, or at least not as in-depth as I want it to be. Now, that is not the same thing as saying that this is going to be really in-depth. It's just that I'm going to talk for a bit longer, which will give me the potential to dig it a bit deeper. Now, I'm alone. I'm not playing off of anyone, so as I said, I have a bit of a checklist here to help me move along and keep the consistency of the podcast. Anyway, usually these are more of a semi-scripted versions of my own videos, but today we're going in raw. Just have just a thought in my mind that's been bugging me for a while that we're actually going to handle, but I can imagine it's going to be quite good. Now, just some context to this is that I've been working, so I might be a bit tired. That might actually reflect both my reasoning and how how enthusiastic I might sound throughout this entire experience for you. So I am very sorry in advance if this in any way, shape or form will lessen the quality. Probably won't, but just so that we're standing on our own 2 feet before we actually move into the entire project. Anyway, with that out of the way, mates, let me just say that this is, I'm just standing on one side of the fence here. This is my perspective based on, my context, my living situation, and my circle of friends, the people that I know, what I've experienced. If you've experienced something different, then feel free and welcome to share that in the comment section below. If you're listening to this on YouTube, or at any other comment tool or comment option that might be available at other places on the interwebs. But as I said, mates, without any further ado, let's get going with the podcast. And today we're going to be discussing graduation. Yeah, because that was something that happened to me quite recently. I graduated. Yeah. A bachelor's degree in business administration and economics from, well, I don't necessarily need to say where from, but from Sweden, at least, right? So that you don't have to be able to pinpoint me and find me out and see exactly which grades I had. Not that I'm ashamed, but they could be better. It's not straight A's, right? And I was very forward in my video that I did on the day, because yes, we're not taking breaks here, not for Christmas, New Year's, or graduation, making videos for each single one of them. And I was kind of saying that graduation wasn't that big of a deal, and that got in the, what can I say, I kind of got on the wrong foot with some people. Right? Some people who thought that, well, is it really not that big of a deal? So I thought, why not take the opportunity to kind of expand my thought process of graduation? Now, I would just like to say in the beginning, before we move forward with this at all, to say that I do not deem a bachelor's degree to be a diminished experience, even though I might talk in a way or refer in a way or sometimes even apply something that might make it seem like it. But I truly believe that a bachelor's degree is not something to snuff about. It's not something that is given. Some people are very good with academic work, so to say. They have an inclination towards academia, and of course, for those people, it might seem easier to take part in the academic structure of our society. But for some people, it's a real challenge, even to get through high school, and in some cases even middle school and upper school, or whatever you say. So, it's still hot. So keep that in mind. Now, I would like to consider myself to be one of the people who are having a bit of an easy time when it comes to the academic parts, as I said, stuff like writing, reading, remembering. I've always had an easy time for it. So that said, when I was making the video on my own graduation, I was making the point that for me, this isn't the end. And I was kind of reflecting the same thing I felt back in the day. I'm allowed to say that now, aren't I? Now that I actually finished university. No, but back in the day when I finished my high school graduation, I was kind of feeling the same thing as I felt when I graduated from, with my bachelor's from university. It wasn't the end goal for me by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. No. This is just a stepping stone, and it should be celebrated as such. Yet again, that doesn't diminish what it actually is, right? It's just that when I was in high school, I was really happy about my contribution that I made in school, right? Because, well, I worked hard for it. I knew people who worked hard, who got rewarded for that hard work. And we were all probably, most of us at least, were very happy with, the results that yielded our time at high school. And for many people, this was the end. This was the place where they were going to be parting ways with, studying forever. For the rest of their lives, right? They're gonna move into the real world. They're gonna they're gonna work at McDonald's. They're gonna work as a mechanic. They're gonna work as an engineer, whatever you might have it. Now, an engineer might be a bit of stretching it, but if you're good enough, right? If you have the natural talent, then why not? But some people, as I said, they move. So some people, many people actually, that I was studying with, moved out to the real world. They were thinking that now is the time. Now is the time to finally stop studying. And for those people, I would just like to say congratulations that you knew what you wanted to do in life at that point in time. Me, myself, I was, I had a plan, but I wasn't entirely certain. If someone, had a gun to my head and said, you need to plan your life, I would probably give the same plan as I had at the time, but I probably wouldn't be sure about it. But many people, as I said, they stopped there. However, I didn't. Many people went the same way as I did as well, so I certainly wasn't alone. But we were a couple of mates, who thought, we'll continue with studying. So for me, high school, even though, as I said, it might have been a rewarding experience, was just a stepping stone because I knew that after summer come university, because I wanted to study directly, which in Sweden, by the way, cultural appropriation isn't necessarily implied. Many people actually take a year off or 2 years off, or in some extent they even take 5 to 6 years off and work in between to kind of get the perspective on what they actually want to work with, because some people rather enjoy stuff, they enjoy being on the, I shouldn't say the basic level, but they have no need to facilitate their growth in a company, for instance. They do not feel, or at least they don't feel like they need a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD in any particular discipline in order to do so. And for those people, it's just not worth going to university, right? So in Sweden, many people actually take a year off, take 2 years off, take 3 years off, as I said, and so on and so forth, to gain the perspective on that. Do I personally need the time to actually, do I need a master's or something else in my discipline in order to further my standings, let's say, at the company? Or do I even need to further my standing? Some people are really content on where they're at. Anyway, I'm digressing, mate. Sorry. Trying to check on my tea at the same time. Multitasking isn't my strong suit. After all, I'm just a man, right? A bit sexist. If I do say so myself, there are plenty of women that I know who are not good at multitasking either. Anyway, but so in high school, I kind of felt that it's just a stepping stone, and that was the same sensation that I had graduating with my bachelor's, because I've had this plan that I'm going to take my high school graduation. Obviously, in my mind, not some people it's not obvious, but in my mind it was pretty obvious, right? And then I was going to move on to my bachelor's. Now I've done that. And then the next step was master's. Now it's a double degree abroad, which is fun. It's what should we say? It's a bit, it's another stepping stone on the journey. But for me, I always had this idea of taking a master's. And then the only iffy part for me is am I gonna take a PhD? We're gonna see when we get there. But for me, at least, the masters were within my grasp of my plan. Now, obviously, that would have changed if it turns out that bachelor, taking a bachelor was the hardest thing I've ever encountered in my entire life. It turns out not to be. The summer works that I've had over the years has been the thing that I'm dreading the most. Has been the worst, especially when in relation to studying. Studying is much better in comparison to actually working. Me doing what shall we say, an honest day's work for the first time in my life now this summer. It's not really what I want to do. I don't want to work physically for the rest of my life. I want an office job. And I feel like my education is kind of putting me on a short track towards that destination. So I was always sure that I wanted to take a master's, go that direction. So for me, yet again, a bachelor was just a stepping stone. I think I facilitated my point, right? Now, yet again, that moves into some inclinations, because when I was making the video and on the day, I was kind of saying that, why are people so happy about this? It's not that big of a deal. I mean, it's only a bachelor's, right? And ever since, it's 2 weeks ago or something like that. I know, crazy. I've gained some perspective. After all, I'm 22. I have some perspective and knowledge about life, if I do say so myself, right? No, but it's really funny to see how I've understood just by this short amount of time how I've been talking to people, trying, networking a bit, talking to people who didn't actually take their bachelor's. Some people I thought were taking the bachelor's because they were at the graduation ceremony, but they actually didn't get their bachelor's. So after talking to those people, simultaneously as talking to the people who got, for instance, a distinguished awards for the best results, when I was sitting there and I was like, I didn't get that, so shouldn't be as smug as I am, because if I would, then I probably should have aimed for that, right? What I'm trying to say is that for me, I see this graduation as a stepping stone. However, I fully understand that for some people this is their end point. Just like for some of my mates back in high school, that was their end point, and this might be theirs. That they will now say that, well, I actually studied an additional 3 years after I was done with high school, which is considered to be kind of mandatory in Sweden, I would say. It's not mandatory. High school, neither high school nor college or university is mandatory in Sweden, but most people go for high school. I would say a good 90-95%. And then a lot of people at least try at university. Not as many people as I would like to see actually manages to finish it, but that's because of various reasons. Could be personal reasons, could be because, yet again, as I said in the beginning, some people have an easier time with academic issues and academic progress than others. And that's all fine, it's all dandy, right? That's what distinguishes us people. Not all, we're not all the same, which is obvious and good, because if we were all the same, imagine how boring that would be. But you probably don't need anyone to tell you about how there would only be one ice cream, there would only be one pair of shoes, one pair of pants, one pair of apartment or whatever, because, people have been talking about that for ages. Making the point that we're all different, right? And that's kind of the subset for me saying that for me it was easy, I'd say, university as an experience, right? Gonna get into that later on, but easy is probably the wrong word, but I imagined university to be so vastly much harder than it actually was. I was going to consider it like a 9-to-5 job, which obviously, when I began, was not the case. That was not going to be the case either, right? Because you just need to study X amount of hours before you get the pattern in a lot of the maths, right? I mean, some people need years upon years to get one formula into their head. Obviously, depending on complexity, we can be talking PhD level, of course, but we're not talking bachelor's here, so it's still pretty basic. I mean, for someone in high school watching the bachelor level maths, it would probably look a bit like advanced A level, right? But it's not. It's really not. It's kind of I still say it's kind of simple. It's about a mindset, right? But for me, it was an easier time than I expected, and that's probably why I kind of unintentionally, but yet semi-intentionally bashed the entire university experience, or rather the graduation part of it. At least the experience of graduation, of university rather, was amazing, and so was actually the graduation ceremony as well. It was a once in a lifetime experience. Or for me, when I'm taking my double bachelor degree, it will be a twice in a lifetime experience. But I realized that for many people who were there, it was going to be an experience that was only going to be attained once in their life. So for them, it was really huge. And that particular moment, that particular bachelor, that particular day was also a once in a lifetime for me, right? It's just that I don't seem to consider it that. And that should be fine, right? I mean, some people embrace it, some people enjoy it, some people do not. Anyway, I'm rambling on. Let's get into some questions that I've written down to ask myself. Yet again, the shortcoming of not being a duo or a group when you're doing these kind of things is that I have to write the questions to myself. But again, as I do with my normal regular videos, I don't really think about them when I write them down. So reading them now will be kind of like having someone asking them to me, which is hopefully going to introduce a level of interaction in the podcast. So the first question goes first: what is it like now? What's the experience actually like now that I have my bachelor degree? And that's a good question, because thank you very much, by the way. Oh, you're welcome. No, but now I've had the time to kind of mentally digest the entire process, because in the beginning, I'd say it was kind of all over the place. Actually getting the degree in my hand, the actual physical degree of saying that, hey, you actually managed to complete university. For me, that was, as I said, a stepping stone, but equally as much, it was a magical moment that I couldn't really grasp, or as I said, I couldn't really digest it in the moment. It's always the same for me, right? I have a hard time really understanding that something is truly over when I'm in the moment. I will probably be like 6 months away from graduation. I will sit by Christmas and be like, wow, I have a bachelor's in economics. And people are going to be like, yeah, old news. And for me, it's going to be like, no, it's fresh to me. Just realized it. Which is a bit awful. But how is it like? What is it like now? If I were to describe it with like one word, it would, and this is kind of unfortunate. Not that unfortunate is a word, right? But I would describe it as relief. And it's kind of sad now, isn't it? Some people might say insight, some people might say, power, because knowledge is power. Some people might actually say knowledge, some people might say experienced, some might say, I don't know, joy, sadness. I don't know. There are many different emotions and many different adjectives you can add to this, right? And it wouldn't make it any less right for that matter. Just for me, it's kind of relieved. I've done it now. I'm done. Just that sense of closure. It's so tangible. Because many things that we've studied over the years has been intangible courses. I would categorize them as intangible courses. And for those of you who do not know the difference between intangible and tangible, it's basically intangible is something like an idea, right? If you're not at home with the English language, as I am not always 100% of the time, since it's not my native language, I'm just picking up this fancy terminology and kind of rolling with it, right? But at least that's the point. That's how I learn. So let's just educate you and maybe semi-educate myself at the same time. So intangible is kind of like an idea. It's kind of like a dream, something that you can't really touch. Whilst tangible things are things like tables, things like a camera, things you can touch and interact with, physically touch. That's all. But we've had many courses that are a bit intangible in their nature. And that is all because, we've been studying management, we've been studying business administration. Lots of it is leadership, lots of it is structure, organization. And whilst there is theory, of course, right? A lot of studying is theoretical work. There is I would say there is a distinguishable difference between intangible and tangible theory. For instance, you can be working with a case study. In my world, that's more like a tangible theory because you can actually apply theory to something, whilst intangible theory is more like, let's say, take the 5-stage model of group development, the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, that kind of stuff. And as long as you don't really connect that to anything, I see that as very intangible, because even if I study 100 hours on that model alone, I can be asked about something on an exam, for instance, putting that in a situation that I haven't prepared for. Now, obviously, if you know the basics of the model, you should be able to kind of apply it to wherever you go, or at least that's the mindset behind it, right? Which is a part of what university tests as well. They test how is your reasoning skills if we put you in an environment which you did not anticipate, or at least not 100% anticipate. And that's good, in my opinion. But many people that I've encountered throughout my life, and that I've encountered especially, unfortunately, at university, have a really hard time adapting what they've learned to a given situation. They want to have it black and white. They want to have this case study that they're kind of studying on, and then they want to have a very similar case, if not actually the same case, on the exam, so that they know exactly when they write exactly what they've done. And I'm kind of semi-digressing here, but the entire idea is that we've studied a lot of courses where the intangible has been applied to a lot of theory. And then it's really hard to kind of feel like when you're ending a course. Of course, you get the grade at the end of a course. That's how we operate, at least at my university. You do a course and then you get graded. Either you pass or you fail. And if you pass, you get assigned a grade towards that. An E, D, C, B, or A. Depending on your performance, right? And that's kind of a tangible end in a way, but simultaneously, there are so many things that are carrying over into the next course. For instance, if you read something like basic financial accounting, for instance, and then you read advanced accounting down the line, then that is something that is applied. Many of those things are applied in the next course. For instance, statistics 1, statistics 2, corporate finance 1, corporate finance 2, the bit more of advanced level. Now, obviously, those are really bad examples because there you count. There you actually calculate, there you do maths, which I would consider yet again to be kind of tangible theory when you get down to it, because you can work with it, right? But it's still this idea that it's building onto each other. But yet again, the worst parts are like sustainable development, for instance, which is a really interesting course, but it's just that many of the things that are introduced there, we work with in other courses as well, just because, this green aspect, this corporate social responsibility, is such an intricate and central part of the learning curve at my university. So we continuously worked with those concepts, even though we were finished with said course. And therefore, I find this kind of relief going out of university. Now a couple of weeks later, when I actually have my degree in my hand, and I've been able to watch it here at home and be like, yeah, it's not disappeared. It wasn't a dream or a nightmare, depending on how you see it. It was actually something real. And that kind of relief of thinking that, first of all my courses that I've done, I'm kind of done with those. Sure, I'm going to continue studying, so they're going to come up again. I have no doubt about it, right? Lots of theory is going to be applied again, especially the theory we introduced in our thesis, which is kind of experimental in a way, can come back in the master's level, maybe in a PhD. We might see, yeah? Which is kind of the exciting thing of uncovering and making your own theory. Now I'm digressing again. But the idea is so tangible and so much of a relief to look back and say that, well, I'm actually done with all of those things. And for now, I can put it all behind me because I've done it. Another thing that's nice, standing on this side of the road, having had it done, is that even though I had in my plan, as I said before, to take a master's and maybe progress to a PhD, it was still not assumed that I would, or rather, for me, it was probably assumed all the time that I was going to pass a bachelor's because, many people do. It's not considered to be that hard in comparison to, for instance, a master's or a bachelor. Of course, it might be harder than high school. It should be, but sometimes you wonder, depending on which country you're in. I'm not going to tell which, but studied in two, and it was considerably lower in one of them, the level, so to say. Even though I gained a lot from it, but still, it's a lot about how much do you yourself make of it. Anyway, it was still not implied that or assumed that I was going to pass it from my own point of view. That this might actually be really hard. What if I got to university doing my bachelor's and halfway through I realized this isn't for me, this is way too hard? That would have been devastating, given my plan in life. Or, we all have a plan in life that doesn't turn out the way we want it to go. But the way I anticipated my life to go, so to say, my preliminary plan, it would have been all out of whack if that wouldn't have worked. And I'm so relieved to be standing on this side yet again and seeing that, well, I actually passed all of those things, and in most of the cases with flying colors. Absolutely. I wouldn't hold anything back when describing that. And I'm really happy about the input I had on my own courses and kind of the knowledge that I took away. But yeah, it's kind of amazing to see that to be able to stand on this side of the discussion is great. Anyway, let's move on to the next point, which is what was I most afraid of? And this is probably along with graduation. Now, obviously, the biggest fear, as I just described to you, is not being able to pass. Them coming out and saying that, well, it's all fine and dandy that you went here, but unfortunately, you didn't pass half your courses. And I'm like, shit. Damn. That was obviously a huge fear going into university overall, taking on an education or taking on any challenge really of any form, right? It is the fear that you won't be able to make it, but that's also kind of what's making the challenge so fun. Because if there is an element of danger, if there is that element of, well, I might not be able to make this if I don't put in 100% all of the time. I might not be able to make this if I actually slag off. I might not be able to make, that idea, that sensation of I might not be able to make this is kind of what makes a challenge, challenging, and what makes the challenge interactive, and why I wanted to interact with this challenge, the given challenge of university. But of course, the biggest fear was me not passing courses, me having lots of courses after me. I've heard the nightmarish scenarios of people from other universities, people from my own university, people from my own bloody program in the same year as me, who has had courses after them. And we're not talking like 1, 2, or 3. We're talking like 7 or 8. It's like, that's a year of university hanging behind you. I don't know how I would cope with that mentally. I'm very, very envious in one way of how their mental stability can hold through that, because I haven't encountered this. I can't tell for certain, right? But I can't imagine how hard that must be. I mean, that would truly be a testament to stress tolerance, if anything. I mean, if I were hiring someone and I saw, you've actually managed to have 8 or 12 courses or something ludicrous like that after you, and still perform and manage to complete the courses that you had before you, I would say that's really good. I would put that on my resume. Now, probably wouldn't, because of the social structure of society, right? How we actually interact with such things that we're very focused on grades and stuff. But imagine though, I mean, it is a good thing now, isn't it, to be able to handle stress in such a way. Anyway, I'm digressing yet again. I seem to be very good at that, but afraid otherwise, well, I can imagine that, as I said, failing or in any form, shape or form, not being able to progress throughout university would have been my biggest fear. Together with group works, because I have this ludicrous, and I'm saying ludicrous because it is, this ludicrous fear of being left out of group works all the time. It's the one thing I'm most afraid of when I'm going into a new course, or when I'm going into a program, or when I'm going into to any given situation when I need to pair up with people. Now, that's not to say I'm good at it. I would consider myself really good at talking in front of people and be the one who's like the social center and the social mucus of the group with no problem. Not necessarily that I need to be, right? I would very much be able to relax in the back seat, right? Taking the back seat on a project, but I have no problem being the one who's standing in the center and talking a lot, dragging all the spotlight to me, which in some sense naturally invites people to come up and form a group with you. And I've even pointed to people and said, like, you're in my group, and they were just like, yeah, sure. And that was like, what, the second day of university I did that, because I was so deeply afraid I was going to be left out. So I just pointed to people that I thought was like high achievers, and I was like, you're with me. And I was like, okay, because they obviously felt like, oh, I've been chosen by a higher power. And I was like, I'm so terribly afraid. Please do not break down and cry. That was kind of my mental process going through that situation. And yeah, those of you, you know, if you ever listen to this, you guys know who you are. That first seminar at uni when I was standing up when everybody else was sitting down, when they were introducing themselves, and I was walking around in the room and picking at the people I wanted to work with. It was, in one way, a really good experience, kind of showing my how innovative I am in certain situations, seeing that everybody's doing something, and I'm like, let's have change for change's sake. but that's enough of that. But my biggest fear obviously was failing, but the other one was being left out of groups, not being able to find people to work with, which turned out to be a nullified problem within 4 days. And then it just snowballed out of control from there. I was, picked by groups. I was headhunted. Now, I'm saying headhunted. I was asked if I wanted to be in a group with people. That's more accurate to the story. Even though I would have liked to say it the other way, right? There were people who were actually headhunted. I was not one of those people. I might have been on 2 or 3 occasions, but not always. There were some staples that people really wanted. And I would like to argue that I was one of them in certain occasions. But yeah, I'm modest. Let's say I wasn't. Yeah, the modesty and honesty. The humble nature of me coming out. But yeah, obviously that's a Maslow's pyramid of needs. This idea of being part of a group, I was really afraid of not being that, which is ludicrous. Yet again, it's of course grounded in some form of fear, but it's really ludicrous depending on, when you think about it, having experienced it, the people that I was working with, or the people that I was with, they're grown-ups by this point, right? We're at university. Most people are actually a bit older. They're a bit more mature. They don't care as much about group pressure, peer pressure, or well, we all do probably, right? But I would say that bullying and stuff is not the same at university as it is in high school and in the earlier stages, because people seem to be a bit more mature. They tend to have a broader perspective on life and so on and so forth. Or at least that's been my experience. You might have had a horrible experience, and if so, I'm really sorry for you. But for me, it was a pleasant experience. Just sailing through university on the social side, which was really good. Let's move on to the third question. What was the most fun about university? And this is quite hard, actually. What was the most fun thing at university? Now, the problem with asking yourself these questions is that normally, if you have a question that's written down, you can kind of make assumptions about the question, narrowing it down. But since I wrote it myself, I should be able to know what I was asking for, but I do not really remember. Is it outside university that happened at the same time? Was it inside university? Let's just try to summarize it a bit. Okay, so inside of university, the funniest thing was the maths for me. I was going to say obviously, but I quickly realized that that's not obvious at all. Most people probably hate that, but I really fell in love with math again, because in the end of high school I was kind of like, I don't want to do the higher levels of math, it's boring, just because I was still getting good grades, right? But my lowest grades were in maths and physics, even though those were the things that I was enjoying the most when doing, but it wasn't my strongest subjects. But university, it all shifted, right? All of a sudden, people were considering me really good at maths, and I guess it's true what they say, right? The engineers who don't know math that well, they become economics were economists, and that might have been what happened, that I was studying with other people who at high school level had been studying what you would say economics, maths, social math, or whatever. I don't really know how to translate that into English, but for any Swedes out there, you probably understand what I'm talking about. So I just felt like the maths guru, and now I'm really hyped for taking up like engineering math courses, a singular course, one or two, right, just to get the maths up, because I think it's so funny. I mean, I really genuinely love it. It's the best thing about university, probably, when I think back on it. The other thing was, I'm nice to myself. I've written down some key words for myself. We can move away from maths then, because I think that it's not much more I can say than I really like maths. Networking, obviously, also a big part. Going to an international school, knowing people from all over the world, being able to have the money to move away from home, because we get grants and loans from our government to study. I know, it's great. And we have free education, even at university level. I know, it's great. And I took full advantage of that, and took the advantage of actually moving away from home and changing living arrangements, changing places, having a girlfriend, living with someone, not living with someone. Tried on most of the things, really grew as a person, and that's also, that was, inclined with, or connected with both ups and downs, let's say. So I probably wouldn't categorize it to be the funniest thing about university, but it was really a place to grow for me at university these past 3 years, which also accumulated at graduation, and graduated. I've had all of these things under my belt now, given that I've taken part in this experience, which is really great. Otherwise, traveling, probably. It enabled me to travel a lot as well, being at university, because since I was anticipating university to be a 9 to 5, and it wasn't, obviously. Needless to say, rather, it was not a 9 to 5 occupation. I had the time and the resources to, since I worked a bit on the side as well, to travel. And that was really cool. I mean, up until university, I hadn't traveled. I think I traveled like to 3 countries. I think I was in Italy, Turkey, and England, in London. That's probably the extent to how much I traveled up until I was 18, 19. No, I went to Prague as well. So maybe 4, like, give or take, like, let's say 5, just to be generous, right? 5 countries. But after that, I mean, it's just spiraled out of control. I think I've traveled something along the lines of like 20 times since I started university. I've been to New York. So let's say countries instead. I've been to Russia. I've been to France. Obviously, lots of places in France. I've been to England. I've been to Germany. Been to Spain. I've been to Monaco. I've been to Italy. I've been to Russia. I've been to Finland. I've been to Denmark. I've been to the Netherlands. I've been to Lithuania, Estonia. I've been all over the place. Man, I mean, I really taken part in travel a lot, but it's mainly in Western Europe, I'd say, and the US, the East Coast of the US. I really want to cut it close here with the Western Europe, East US for some reason. Where I feel at home probably is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. No, but it's that has really been a fun experience as well, to be able to, what should we say, increase my bridges, so to say. I don't know if that's how you say it in English, but really breach my bridges. I haven't been able to increase them. Yeah, and next question is, what have I gained by this experience? This is where I wrote home. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. So fun thing, math and networking, friends and traveling. And experience gained has probably been me, moving away from home. I would probably semi-slot in traveling here as well. But something that I've really learned is that I really enjoy economics. I know I said maths, right? But I really enjoy economics. Really opened my eyes for it, right? To talk about call and put options just for fun. To talk about how you trade stocks, why you should trade certain stocks, what kind of stocks there actually exist, how the market actually changed and why, what can be reasons for it, how does a company actually work, what's the structure of a company, how is the hierarchical structure working, does it need to be a hierarchical structure, and to what extent of hierarchy does a company need to operate, if to any at all? Is there different ways of communicating? Is there different ways of understanding a business? If you want to start a business, what are the most common things to think about? What are common mistakes people do? And it just feels like I've lived an entire life of business, but compiled and compressed into 3 really meaningful years filled of courses that have gained me like the skeleton of how to operate in the real world. Now, obviously, I wouldn't compare me to someone who had worked their entire life in economics or in business. Obviously not. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's ludicrous. Probably can't even compare me to someone who's worked like 2 years in economics and such, right? But if we take someone who had to learn everything for the first time by themselves, that's like, if you imagine that they're doing something like 2 years and then they learn one new piece of theory and then they implement that in their business for the next 3 years and then they learn something new, then over the course of their entire career they're probably gain the theoretical framework of an entire bachelor. And it feels like we've taken all of those theoretical parts out and compressed that into 3 meaningful years, and now we can move on with all of that knowledge into the actual working environment, where we will start understanding how wrong we are about all the assumptions that we made. Every consumer isn't rational. What do you mean by that? Then nothing works. What do you mean that not everyone want to buy this thing that I put up just because it has a lower price? No, they don't. But why? Supply and demand doesn't work. Adam Smith from 1776, isn't he the Messiah? No? Yeah, it's funny. But actually opening up my own eyes for how much I really love economics and what I've actually studied. And I would argue myself to be really, well, what should I say, favorable is really the wrong word here. I would argue myself to be very lucky in the sense that I've studied something that I really, truly enjoyed. Because I know people, I have friends. Yeah, that sounded really weird. There are some people who I've been in contact with, who I've known for years actually, so I do not know why I started like that. Me trying to be humble, right? But it didn't actually work out. It just made me sound really weird. Anyway, let's try it from the start. Let's take it from the top. Some people that I know have gone through 2 or 3 years of university without graduating, because 3 years without graduating because they have courses after them or whatever. And they've jumped off because they've realized that what they were actually trying to achieve, with their education, with their program, wasn't what they wanted to do in life. Which is sad in a way, because now they've invested this time that they could have done other things, but in the same time it's kind of good because now they actually definitively know, they've tried it and they know, no, it wasn't for me, right? It's an experience to gain. And you know me, I like an experience over cash, right? I'm that kind of person. I would rather jump out of an airplane and survive than get a Christmas bonus that could buy me a jet, right? You see what I'm saying? I like kind of the experience mentality. It's worth so much more in my opinion. Obviously, I haven't started working yet, so I haven't gotten that hard-earned cash yet. I haven't held it in my hand. So I probably can't argue this point for anything. But what I'm trying to say is that I would still support him to say that, well, it's good that you've done this, even though it turns out you didn't want to do this for the rest of your life. Now you definitively know that you don't want to do this for the rest of your life, which I think is good. But I would consider myself really lucky that I've been one of those people who have been studying. And whilst I've been studying, I've not only met people who are enjoying the same things, but I've also opened my eyes to, well, I actually enjoy this. I can sit the Friday night just flicking through a book about graphs, about how to anticipate the market changes based on a social media outburst, let's say. Now, we haven't had that as an example, but I can imagine that to be very interesting to look at. And, just opening my eyes to, I really enjoy this way of interacting with theory, this way of interacting with economics, this way of interacting with life, seeing it from this lens. And I think it is a common problem, or a common, application for most people who study anything, or especially for people who study anything, yeah, anything, any given thing, or people who have worked for a really long time in the same sector, as I'd say. They feel like, wow, I've really gained a perspective to view life based on what I've done or based on what I've studied that nobody else will understand if they haven't done the exact same things as I have. And they probably also think that, well, I've studied engineering. People don't understand reality as we know it wouldn't work if there wasn't engineers, and all of the other disciplines and all of the other things are ludicrously irrelevant if engineering isn't part of it. Or you say that you worked in a hospital and you're a doctor or you're a nurse, and you would just say that, society wouldn't work if there weren't nurses, right? Society wouldn't work if there weren't doctors. And I, unfortunately, have been trapped in that mindset for a long while. I entered it in, I'd say, early in the first semester of my first year at university, and I didn't get out of it until later in my third year of university, in the third semester, actually, in corporate finance too, in advanced corporate finance, right? It wasn't until then I actually realized that, wow, maybe economics isn't the most central part of our society after all, because I got this view of viewing society from an economist's point of view, or from rather a person who's studying economics point of view, which is fairly obvious since I am a person who is studying economics, and that's my point of view. But what I'm saying is that I saw society as a whole being connected through what I've learned. I was like, it's obvious that this works based on this. And when you think about it, nothing really matters unless we have economists in the world, right? That kind of mindset, which is really bad. I mean, it's so sad that people can get into it to begin with, but it's true, right? I mean, and you all probably know it. You've all probably done it at some point. You've been thinking if my occupation didn't exist, the world would look really different. And that's probably true, but you still spin it in such a way so you think that if my occupation wouldn't be here, then, society would have worked, society would have crumbled. Yeah, I'm alright, people, I'm alright. To some extent, there probably are someone somewhere to which that statement holds, and it's true. But it's probably more up to individual people or companies than entire sectors, I'd say. Or, well, probably people would say the other way around, but that's not strengthening my point of this argument, so I'm going to say my way. But I was really lucky that, for one, I got out of that mindset. I was into it and out of it pretty quickly to understand that, wait a minute, it's probably, all people probably view the world like this and society like this, and all of it is important. Nothing is irrelevant, because if you take out any given part, society would probably change very much, and if you take out certain more intricate parts, society would probably crumble, depending on what you actually pick out of society. So everything is important because it's an interchange machine, let's say. It's just, different parts that you interchange. So that was very important. I was very lucky to understand, to get into that and get out of that rather quickly, even though there's lots of mistakes I haven't done yet that I'm probably still in and still making, that I haven't realized yet, that other people have realized. But this is just one of those things that I managed to realize, or I think I've realized. I might get into it again saying that, how dumb I was to think I was out of it when it's actually true. Could be very much be the case. After all, as I said, I'm a world-renowned economics student of 22 years old. I've seen it all. It's so far from the truth, it ain't even funny. Anyway, but I was also very lucky to study something that I enjoyed and study something that I thought was, funny, utterly funny. With the math thrown in there, rekindling my spirit in maths and study economics and study management, especially study leadership, because even though this might be contradicting, but even though I'm very afraid of being left out of group works, I really like taking on the leading role in a group work. I like to be the one in charge. I like to be the one who's structuring things. Why? Well, because I like getting things done. And this is not me just saying this in case anyone in the future is going to watch this, as I recommended them to be like, do you want to know a bit about me? Well, look at my graduation podcast from a couple of years back, or hopefully, a couple of weeks back, if I only got the job. No, just kidding. I'm going to keep studying. If I wanted a job, I actually would have gotten one, because I've been offered 3 at this point. Me being a bit smug, can't be humble all the time. But I really like taking the spearhead of an initiation, right, of a project. I really like to keep going and go through and work through and getting things done. So I really like to be part of the leadership position and then study leadership to I was going to say some degree, but to a very large extent study leadership and how it works, especially in a management situation, especially in a corporate situation, in corporate context. It's really helped me, and that might sound strange, but I'm thinking about theory. Yeah, when I'm structuring how we're gonna work in our groups, I'm like, what theory can we apply? Can it be Maslow's here? If depending on how they want you, depending on how they interact, maybe we can bring out Mount itself. Yeah, no, that's obviously for CSR, but there are different things that I'm thinking about when I'm working in, working with them. It's the 2 factors model. It's the 5 factors of or 5-stage model of group interaction and development. There's lots of things that you can encounter and that you can consider when you go through. And I'm really lucky that I've been studied something that I really found immediate use for, so to say, and that I felt an immediate impact of, that I felt like this is my jam right here. Yeah, this is what I really want to do. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. Let's see. Yeah, that's probably my main experience. Where do I see myself in 5 years based on that I have this discipline, this graduation, like that I have this degree, versus if I didn't take it? That's actually kind of a good question. I'd imagine I'd be heartbroken, really sad, and if I didn't have my bachelor based on that it was too hard. That's just me, right? If you didn't manage to take it, it's probably because of different reasons. But since I made it now, looking back at it and thinking if I hadn't managed, I would probably be very sad, in comparison to how I feel now based on that I managed to do it. That sounded really weird, but I'm comparing myself, a hypothetical myself 3 years ago who didn't know, who still knew about me now, how I feel about it and how I would feel about me not making it. Yeah, makes sense? No? Okay, move on anyway. I would imagine that I wouldn't be that happy. But let's just say I was happy because, for some reason I'd considered, it wasn't in my plan. Let's say that. So if I wouldn't have bachelor's, master's, PhD, whatever in my plan, how would my life look like? What would it look like? I'd probably say I had a family by now. No, but in 5 years from now, if I didn't have a degree, I would probably be very family focused because I really want kids. At one point in time, in one point in the future, I'm really seeing kids as a possibility for me. Even if I need to adopt or whatever or whatnot, but I just need like someone to pour all my love over, and that sounds really strange, but in a completely normal way as a parent, right? I really feel the urge of being a parent. I really feel like that's a rewarding experience to pass on the knowledge that you have to someone and being part of someone's development and really being able to love someone to that extent that parents seem to love their kids. And it's so pretentious to say that, oh, I know what that's like, because I don't. And that's a reason for why I want to have a kid, right? And it's not well, now we're getting into an entirely different discussion. That's probably a podcast of its own. But in short, I don't think that you should get a kid just because you want a kid. You should get a kid because you feel like you're ready to have a kid. And you know that you're going to love the kid no matter what happens to you and your partner, or if you're alone, right? And you're just adopting by yourself. But that you should know that it's going to be a burden at times, but the love that you're going to feel for this individual is going to be so much stronger than any burden you can be taken on. And that's the kind of love that I kind of want to feel in my future. Be experiencing that and really love someone to that extent that I can't even imagine at the moment. So I'd say that in 5 years' time, wow, I really got honest there. But yeah, in 5 years' time, I'd say that if I didn't get a degree, I would probably be very focused on getting a family, getting a steady job, no matter what it was, because I would be so focused on that the family was the thing that was important to keep in mind, that my family would be coming first over everything else, and I would be I would probably hang out a lot more with my own family, would I? It's easy to say now since I moved away, and I moved quite far away. It's not like it takes a day to go up. It takes half a day to drive up to me from where my parents live, so it's not that far away. I mean, it's not like I'm on the other side of the world or in another country, which I was at one point. But it's still a bit away, so you can't just drop in, without any plans made. So let's say it's not really worth it, right? If things turns out to go wrong. So based on that, I live so far away, I'm really closely connected to my family now. But wonder if I would be that if I stayed, and wonder, that's also interesting. Wonder if I'd stayed. I'd say I'd probably move away anyway if I could, but it probably would have ended up with me not being able to move away because I would be so limited in my choices, or I would feel like I was limited in my choices of where I could work, let's say. So I would probably stay where I was, probably in the southern parts of Sweden. The very southern parts of Sweden, even though I'm in the kind of in the south part of Sweden still, but it's more in the middle, I guess, south middle part. But I was living in the furthest southest part of Sweden you can get, basically, and I would probably stay there if and try and start a family and look for a stable job if I didn't get a degree. That's kind of the only thing I can imagine seeing in front of me right now. That's kind of even remotely realistic to my situation and kind of the goals I have in life, because I probably still would have this experience over money idea, so I wouldn't be that bothered of getting the best job I could, just a sustainable, I would just be focused on getting an income that could be sustained and that could be counted on, so that I could save and budget for a kid. And budgeting and stuff and saving and stuff was stuff that I was doing long before I started university, right? So I wasn't a stranger to that, so I would still do that. But I can imagine 5 years from now, if I didn't have a degree, family, and one can also argue 5 years from now, if I didn't have a degree and I wasn't aiming to get a degree or any further degrees. That's probably the right way of saying it. Family focused, try have a job, no matter what job it was, no matter if I was happy or not at the job, probably because I would be so happy to have a kid that would be the light of my life and the focus of, the center of my own universe, which everything else would surround. I kind of imagine I would be less mature as well if I hadn't gotten a degree, because let me level with you. Getting a degree got me in contact with a lot of people who have a good sense of imagination and humor and are very innovative, but who are also a bit older than I am. I think I was the youngest one. No, I wasn't the youngest one, but I was amongst the youngest one who started at university, because I was coming directly from high school, right? So I didn't have any form of stop in between, and as I said, in Sweden most people actually do. So I was hanging out with people who were it's sometimes considerably older than I was, who was going back to school after years and years of working, and came back, which is obviously nothing wrong with that. It's probably just more power to them that they actually managed to get back. I don't see how I would be able to get back after I have the study stream of income after a while and get back to living as a student. But you can save, I guess, and stuff like that. But that was kind of introducing me to a world of a harsh reality. No, not a harsh reality, but the reality of people that I encountered now, just 3 months after stopping at high school, were so much more mature. And even the people in my own age, or people very similar to my own age, were acting very like a lot more mature. Maybe because it was a business school, maybe because there were lots of internationals. They had a bit of an understanding of how they were supposed to act. I had a bit of an understanding, a preemptive understanding about how I was supposed to act. Other people around me had a preemptive understanding of how business people or business students should react, should act, so on and so forth. So I'd say that has helped me mature a lot as a person. Yeah, and obviously I wouldn't have done YouTube. Maybe no, probably not. I would probably be more focused on the general things, so to say. So I would say if I started working directly, I would probably be even closer, even though I would consider myself to be as close as I can. No, not as close as I can be, but reasonably close, given the physical distance between us with my friends back from high school and back from where I was from. I'm, joining up and meeting them once a year or twice a year or thrice a year, depending on how often I'm home, for an extended amount of time, so that I have the time to meet them and not just be with my family, right? I'd say I would be more with them if I hadn't left, which I don't think I would have if I would have not gotten a degree. So 5 years from now, family, steady job, not a bit less mature, but it's hard to say. Probably into golf. And that might sound like that's, first of all, where did golf come from? Second of all, for those who kind of semi-know, isn't like tennis and golf like the rich man's or the upper class sports, because they're kind of it's kind of an investment at times in the gear that you need to get. But I'd say that many people in my family play golf, so if I were to stay home, I would probably join up with them and play golf with them. So that's my assumption, right? That I would start doing that, and then I would do as my dad did with me when I was a kid, and I would put a golf club, a plastic one for kids, in the hands of my son or daughter or whatever, and be like, yeah, go play with that. Oh, it's such a lovely scenario that I'm painting up for myself. Maybe I should skip studying. This sounds awesome. Not care about money, not care about status at all. Just care about my a potential family in the future. Oh, I get you can't see it, but I'm actually tearing up. It's crazy. Oh yeah, just opening up my mind to that possibility. But no, let's get real here. The other possibility, or rather the path that I'm on, is that where do I see myself in 5 years with the degree, is probably the second part of that question. And that is, in 5 years, and this is so sad in comparison to happy wife, happy life, or a happy man for that man. You never know. Could be open to both parts, right? Shouldn't close out that possibility. Or just living by myself with a kid, adopting or not adopting. Maybe I wouldn't be able to. Okay. Anyway, let's keep with the general scenario. I would say that now, 5 years from now, 1 year double degree, that's 1 year. 2 year masters, that's 3. And then a PhD, which can take all from 1 to, let's say, 5 years, depending on what you're really studying. But I would be saying more general 3 years. So in 5 years, I'm probably in the middle of my PhD. Wow, that's so not all the same. Oh, wow. I'm not saying I made the wrong life choices here, but man, that prospect of me is thinking about it right now. Wow. It doesn't sound as fun now, does it? But on the other hand, nothing is keeping me from getting a family after that, right? So it can still pan out with all of that happy stuff after I'm done with my PhD or whatever. So that's good. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that. So that's not a problem. That's not a problem. That's no problem really. But it's just in comparison, probably doesn't sound as exciting. But for me, PhD and stuff like that, it's like dreams. We're talking dreams coming true. Yeah. So for me, that would be like fulfilling a dream. And then when I had that, I could be focusing on other things that I felt like was important to me. So that I wouldn't have gotten a family and then said, oh, I want to take a PhD, but now I kind of have my family, quote unquote, in the way of doing that, because I can't just jump ship with my with my work, because then I'm, the kid is probably not going to have it as good as it had before, and can't leave my wife, husband, or whatever, my partner, let's just say partner, I can't just leave my partner to work for both of us, right? That's not fair. And then you have to have this conversation. Is it fair? Is it not? Should I take student loans? Should I not? Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. It's a whole mess of things. Open kind of worms there, yeah? Even though other people are doing it, and props to you. I do not understand how you do it right now, as of me right now. Yet again, this world-renowned, experienced 22-year-old. I do not know how you do it, but that's probably good. Because if I knew, then I would probably be an arrogant twat if I would say that I knew. Anyway, 5 years from now, PhD. And then after that, probably, other stuff. Oh yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it, because underneath there I said, what about 10, 20, or 100 years then? Well, 100 years, considering where technology is going right now, I would probably, I'm 22, I'd be 122, I'd probably be either dead or stuck in a tube somewhere. Either my ashes could be distributed over a nice lake or a mountainside or Mars or the moon or whatever, or I would be in a tube, just my brain or something, and then I would steer a robot like with a PlayStation or Xbox controller or something and be like, yeah, this is virtual reality, augmented reality taken to a whole new level. Old me. Yeah, that could be one possibility. I would say that would probably go both, the same both ways, because I do not think, and this is me being realistic. I was going to say pessimistic, right? But I would argue pessimistic and realistic at the same time. I do not think that I will become the next Bill Gates. Yeah, I'm just calling it right now. I do not believe I will be the next Steve Jobs or the next Bill Gates. So I'd say that either if I have a degree now or not, it would probably not change my economic situation so vastly much that we're getting into any experimental things in the future based on my income, right? So I'd say these outcomes are probably very much the same from when I'm 122 years old in the future, either if I got a degree or not. And I'd say, yeah, either in a tube or ashes somewhere, because, coffins would probably not be a case anymore because of the living arrangements. Yeah, getting crowded in them cemeteries, am I right? So that's where I see myself in 100 years. 10 and 20 though, that's interesting. 10, I guess, stuck in a dead-end job or something, which I now realize it sucks. My kid has grown up and become an ass to me. I still love him or her, but they hate me because they're in the teenage years or whatever. That probably would have happened if I didn't get a degree. Was when I'm getting a degree, I would have just gotten a kid, probably gotten into a family, have a nice career, have a kid that still loves me for who I am, not in the teenage years yet. Yeah. And then if we move in 20 years, I would probably be very happy again as a parent in the non-degree world, where I'm looking at my kid who's finally, moved out, got a job of their own, found their own spouse, let's say, and I'm just there like, oh, look at what we've done. Oh, I'm so proud. Whilst in the other world of a degree world, I would be now living in teenage hell. In the end of my career, where I'm thinking that, oh my God, I'm not going to get any further. No! All the depression and stress just dwindling down at the same time. I know it would be the best now, wouldn't it? And that's the path that I am on. Not to say that that's exactly what's going to happen, but that's one scenario. Could also be that I'm sitting on a yacht on a private island somewhere, right? And I actually became the next Bill Gates, and I'm saying like, well, I cured cancer or something, and I'm an economic twat who kind of, instead of distributing that to everyone who needs it, I'm selling it for a really high profit, so that I can, instead of making a real change in the world, I can become rich, because money is meaningless to me now. But yeah, woohoo! No, probably wouldn't do that. Wouldn't have the character to. If I found something that's that impactful for humanity, I probably would be the person who would go out and be like, you know what, I've studied economics and I'm still giving away this for as free as I can. I'm not making profit out of this, I promise. And people will be like, you sketchy piece of shit. Yeah, but that's the problem of being nice and studied economics, right? You can't. It's like you can't have both of both the best of both worlds, but you can be both nice and studied economics, even though most people won't believe you. So, what will you miss the most? I assume that I meant miss the most. Yeah, what will I miss the most? It's yet again obvious, isn't it? The math. No, it's not. It's obviously the friends, the people, the connections you made. As I mentioned, and I have mentioned several times, I'm going to an international school. We're very heavily on internationality. I imagine we're the most international school internationally integrated school in Northern Europe and in Europe overall, maybe. I'm not really sure, really. But we're very integrated with internationality in my particular school. Now you probably know how to find it. Anyway, I might as well say it. I kept it like a hidden secret for so long for some reason. I'm like, I don't really want to say it. But then I said where I went abroad. When I went abroad, I was like, oh, I went to Kedge. Yeah, and they have a thing with our school. I might have said it before, but it's Jönköping International Business School. Jönköpings Internationella Handelshögskola in Swedish. Yeah, that's where I've studied. I liked it. Pretty much enjoyed it. It was an enriching experience. But the problem with that is, and I can begin with saying that when I was in Bordeaux, I encountered I encountered lots of people that I made connections with and that didn't fully enjoy until I left, which is sad, but it's just basic human behavior. Or it's just me, could be the case as well. But it's just basic human behavior that you do not really, appreciate things until they're gone. Even if you try, believe me, even if I try to enjoy something, I do not really enjoy them until they're gone. And that's sad, but it's true. So with those people, there are lots of people from France I miss now. And that's the same thing as I'm going to encounter a couple of months from now. And I'm like, oh, some of the people I met at university, I might not ever meet again. Because we were at such an international level. I mean, there's people living all over the world. I know people who lived in small villages in China that even if I tried to find them, without them helping me, I probably wouldn't be able to. I mean, if I had infinite resources and infinite amount of time and only dedicated my time finding them, I would probably be able to find them. That's not what I'm saying. But within a reasonable span of a vacation, if I just wanted to take a trip, I probably wouldn't be able to find them, most likely. And that's just one occasion. A very close friend, or that I consider to be a very close friend of mine, who lives in Abu Dhabi now, I think, but he's from El Salvador. And if I went to El Salvador, probably wouldn't find him there either. Sure, I have his number and stuff like that, and we were very close over at least 2 years at university. But still, some people it's hard to get in touch with, and that's what I'm gonna miss the most. It sounds cliche, I know, but the people that you meet, the connections that you make, those are the things that's really worth, the university experience, I'd say. And we're probably gonna get into that later, but that's what I'm gonna miss the most. The people that I probably won't ever see again. And I'm including people that I didn't even like. I mean, there's this one guy, not gonna mention him by name, ain't even gonna describe him, right? Except for one habit he had. It was like he went to the coffee machine in the library, and he kind of, I'm not gonna say shouted because that's wrong, but he was making a very loud noise every time he pressed, like, I don't drink coffee, so I have no idea. It was just a magical machine in my world, right? That spit out some black goo or something. But people seem to love it. But he was standing there, and when he was pressing, coffee, I assume it's like, go, coffee, go, come in my cup or whatever. That sounded awful and wrong. Which some people might sounded like an invitation. But what I'm trying to say is, don't really know what he pressed, but there came in coffee, and he was just making these very weird noises. I cannot even replicate noises, but it was kind of like, and I do not know if that was an involuntary response to the coffee machine that he had, if it was some form of issue, like medical, like diagnosable stuff, or if it was just something that he did, because I've seen him doing it in our school as well, in our parts of the school, and then he didn't do it. But when he was in the library, he did it. And I've seen it at 4 separate occasions doing this. And I'm not talking 4 separate occasions the same day. I mean 4 separate occasions for different days in like different years. Like one or two of them even spanned years in between each other. And I was just like, am I coming at a very bad moment? Or is this just something that you do? Mate, I don't get it. It was a Starbucks coffee machine. It might be a thing. It might be a viral internet thing that I have no idea about, right? Could very much be the case. But I just thought it was weird. Which is very bad, since I'm obviously now deconstructing how much I judged a person based on a behavior I didn't ask about. So that's really bad. But nevertheless, he is one of those people that I will not actively, that I did not actively try to talk to or seek out during my stay at university, but that I will still kind of miss now that we're gone. That's kind of the level of how I will miss people. I will miss. I want to, like, since I wouldn't say that I have an OCD. I wouldn't say that I have a compulsive disorder of any kind, but I have a very. I'm a very organized person. I like to know stuff. I like that. I like the sensation of organizing. I like things being in order. I like to know stuff, especially about people that I know. I like to categorize, like, what's happened to you? What's happened to you since we met? Because it's not only interesting for me to know how your life has turned out and that you're still alive or that you passed, but based on how I knew you then, and how you've turned out now, I can now evaluate people based on that if they do the same thing as you did then, it's a possibility that they will turn out like you are now, based on the encounters that you've had in your life stories, let's say. Which is probably, like, I would argue, and I might be wrong, but I would argue that it's a better way of preemptively categorizing people if you've encountered a lot of people who you've had an encounter with previously a couple of years back, and now a couple of years in the future, or in the present, whatever you want to say, you've encountered them again, and you kind of getting understanding of, oh, that's where you were then, this is where you are now, this is kind of what have happened, and then you can use that as a preemptive categorization of people in the future, which is, what you do, what your brain does automatically, but this is just a bit more of an active thought process through it. Anyway, that's probably bad, but that's how much I would, I'd miss people just because I want to know what they do. So that's what I'm going to miss most. The people I'm never going to meet again. Obviously, I'm going to miss the people I'm going to meet again as well. It's hard to know which people I'm going to meet and not going to meet again to some degree, to some extent. You might run into people without even knowing it. And other people you might never meet again that you thought you were going to meet the next week. Could be the case as well. But I'm going to miss those people over time the most, because I'm never going to be able to, if I'm never able to see them again, I will be like, well, some of those people I actually wanted to meet up with again, now I never will. So that's really sad, but that's what I will miss the most. Anyway, was it worth it? Do I feel like it was worth it? It's my last question to myself. Thank you, Past Philip. Now I can move on by myself and talk about, was it worth it? And as I was kind of nibbling on before, the networking experience of university is what is most worth of university. Hands down. I'm just going to sip of my tea here. Oh yeah, that's good. Cold. Just how I like it. Obviously not, but it's been a while now. Yeah, networking is probably what has been the most worth part of university. I don't know why I'm gesturing a lot to try to convey my point, that you can see that. No, but what I'm trying to say is that if I would give a reason for why you should go to university, and this is probably the case if you start working as well. I think I've talked about this before. It's certainly something I've been talking about in my life before. It's the idea of, well, if I start at a work, I will meet new people, right? I will meet lots of new people. They will shape my understanding of how the world works. They will shape my understanding of, well, everything. Not everything, but they will help shape my understanding of the work field, of where I work, my interests, and so on and so forth moving forward. And you will do that when you start university too. It's just that when you start at university, you will encounter much more people, such a wide array of people. I'm sure you've seen all of these very weird, or I'm saying very weird, all of these funny or serious dramas or comedies of of colleges or university movies, of just how many different kinds of people it can be at a university or at a college. And that is true in reality as well. I mean, you meet people who are who are distinguished in different groups, who are grouped together, who do stuff. They're very specialized in what they do. They have very specific interests. There are lots of people. We're talking thousands upon thousands of people that you can encounter. So obviously they're going to be niche groups that are formed, and these people are going to be seen as weird or awesome or popular or unpopular or however you want to place them, right? And the connections that you make there are going to be the most worth from university, I'd say. And that is one of the reasons why I would say you should go study at university. Once, to experience this, first and foremost, and second of all, even if you're very bad at what you do, and this was something that a friend of mine told me when I was younger, is that I consider to be a friend. I lost my train of thought. No, yeah. It doesn't matter. If you go to the best school in the world, let's say, it doesn't matter if you just barely passed all your courses, because you're still going to know half or, 2/3 or a third or 25%, 10% of the best people in your country or the best people in the world in your field. So based on that networking you've done, you will be able to probably still be able to get a pretty decent job. They probably think that you're an idiot, right? Or they will think that, oh, you're not that good in school, but you're a very competent person. That's the reason why we're friends with you. And friends helps each other out. It's unfortunate in one way in the hiring process, but it's true. It's true. So this entire networking part is really important, and I would say the most worth part of going to university, that you make these connections, that you meet these people, that you get the experience of meeting different kinds of people, that you open yourself up to the idea that there are different kinds of people, because that's not something that's obvious. Apparently, I've always thought that it's obvious throughout my life, even though people might be contradicting me on that. So let's just say, ever since I started high school, with certainty, I've known that you should be open to different kinds of people, and that there is nothing wrong with someone looking, dressing, and behaving a different way, as long as it doesn't hurt or harm anyone else, right? Obviously, that there probably is some niche examples when that isn't the case, though. So don't take that as an absolute certainty, but like a rule of thumb. But there are a lot of people who, or rather, yes, I've always been of the mindset that, you shouldn't judge people, and you shouldn't treat them any worse or any better just because they look look a different way. But if that isn't clear to you before, it will be at university, since you will encounter all of these different people, especially at an international school, and that has been very that eye-opening experience of a multicultural interaction, and the amount of networking that you do. That you meet these people, that you talk to people, that you're out there, that you're really taking part in meeting lots of just meeting people. It's important, especially in today's dying age, when we're getting so much critique, right, of not meeting people. We're just at our screens, we're just at our computers, we're just with our video games. We don't go out and meet people that much. And university is a splendid opportunity to do that, to go out and actually network. So I'd say that's the most worth thing from university. I'd say that's the thing that I will remember the most. That's the thing that I will take away from university forever. That's the one thing I'm taking away from university. That experience. Some lesser experiences, though, that are still huge in my life, but are lesser in comparison to the networking part. It's obviously that. Well, it's not good to say, but there are a lot of jobs out there. Let's just say it like that. That I've been offered, or that other people I know have been offered, and some people have taken them, or that other people that I know are working with or working at, that requires you to have a bachelor's, for instance, or a master's for that matter. In the application process. And that is not officially said, but I and a couple of friends have a theory about that. That's not necessarily because you need a bachelor's or a master's to actually complete the task in front of you. Not necessarily. It's more like we get so many applications if we do not have this as a requirement. So we kind of need to have this as a requirement in order to get the people that we want. And you get a finer selection of people, and there is a higher probability that they will be good at delivering and making projects and completing projects than the average applicant, for instance, because they've been able to complete the bachelor's or a master's. So it's not that much about their specific area of interest all of the time. A lot of the time it's more about, well, have you been able to complete a master's or a bachelor? Yeah, okay, good. Then we know that you are at a certain level of complexity, a certain level of understanding. We know that you're able to do things at a certain level. We estimate a certain level of quality from you and a certain work pace from you. Whilst we believe that other people who haven't taken a bachelor probably could have done the exact same job as you do, but we're more comfortable hiring you who have a bachelor or a master's than we are hiring someone who don't have one, because the selection process is that much finer, and yet again the probability of getting someone who is actually fit for the job we want them to do is higher. And that's also a reason for taking a bachelor's. Plus that you learn a lot of stuff. I truly think and truly believe that I learned a lot of stuff that I can apply at the workplace. I've already done so actually in my current work position and workplace. I've introduced some ways of making our work day more efficient, and that has been met with criticism. I can't lie, right? I can lie, but shan't lie. Because there's people who've been working there in that particular sector for like years and years and years, and they're like, look at Mr. Big Shot being here. He's 22 years old, been working here for 1.5 weeks, thinking he can making everything so much more effective with his bloody theories. And I'm like, yeah, but if we just assume that everyone's rational, and they're like, ha, but they're not. And I'm like, oh, okay, no, then it doesn't work. But I truly believe that there are lots of things that I've learned that will help me, if only to like reason with people. Because I also believe that an idea of why you have a bachelor's is that you should be able to talk to your peers when you start working. For instance, a lot of people have read about Adam Smith, for instance. Let's just take that. The invisible hand in the market. If people ask you and talk about the invisible hand of the market, if they talk about supply and demand, perhaps a bit simplify there, but if they, for instance, talk about a call or a put option, you should be able to know what that means. You should be able to talk the same language. And even if they talk about theories that doesn't really work, like the efficient market hypotheses, if they're like, yeah, we're talking about this, it's this kind of reasoning we're following, they know that, oh, it doesn't really hold because people aren't entirely rational. So, people are biased. It kind of doesn't work. But so we know it doesn't work. But do you understand what I'm saying if I'm saying that the thing I'm talking about is following the same kind of reasoning as this theory? Even though I know that theory doesn't work, but that's kind of the reasoning that they apply. Even though it doesn't work there, it kind of works here. Do you see what I'm saying? So you kind of, you get a frame of reference, that you get the knowledge down, you get the terminology down, you can actually interact with people because it's assumed in one way that they've been studying and, learning the same things as you have. So you can just unload your natural capability when it comes to, well, your given field when you talk about that. So I also believe that is a very important reason for having a bachelor's or master's, because even though those are things that you can be learning at your work, if what should we say, if developing within the ranks or if advancing within the ranks is important to you, then you wouldn't want them to waste time thinking that you're an idiot. And this is harsh, but it's probably true, that you're an idiot because you don't follow their train of thought based on that you don't know their terminology because you haven't studied it. And they feel like, oh, he doesn't understand what we're talking about, or she doesn't understand what we're talking about. Ah, idiot. And it's bad, but some people do work that way, and it's sad, but it's true. And then they feel like, oh, we need to explain everything for this person, and this person might have just didn't feel like it was worth their time studying a bachelor's or master's, and they're actually 5 times more competent than any bachelor level student that comes out that they can hire. But just because they didn't know the language, they're getting hindered because of that, and then they might be stuck at the position they're at for like 2, 3, or even 5 or 6, 10 years maybe, because they do not know the language yet, and that is their only barrier to like proceed. Even though their ideas and suggestions might be really smart, the syncrecy in language they use might be so great that their bosses don't consider them to develop. And as a guest lecturer to ours said, was that you're very dependent on having a good boss if you want to advance in a corporation, because it's up to them to suggest that, well, perhaps we should put this person forward because they've done X, Y, and Z, and they've done it really good. They've done it really well. So it's up to them as well to further elevate you. That's what I mean. It's important to get the knowledge down, the terminology down and the language down, even though it might seem like such a small thing, but it can actually have a snowballing effect, let's say, later on down the line. But yeah, most worth thing, absolutely, the networking. Now, that was probably it for me, though. I thought that I went through some topics about graduation, what I've thought about it so far. I've had a bit of time at least to work through this entire process, this entire experience. One thing I might add is that based on the work I'm doing now, I'm more certain than ever that I do not want to work with this for the rest of my life, which is giving me a further incentive to study. And that's also a reason to study, because it gives you more opportunity to choose different things. Imagine that you have the exact same requirements, the exact same experience or whatever as someone else when applying for a job. The only difference is that you have a bachelor's, or that you have a master's, or that you have a PhD. Then guess who they're going to pick? It's probably going to be you, because you have a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD. Might be sounding, to some of you who don't have one and don't consider to get one because you don't believe in it, it might sound really strange. And to some degree it does, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you're any better than anyone else. But just that, well, you have that additional thing in your resume, so it kind of looks good. I know, it's stupid in a way, but it still works and it serves its purpose. And yeah, it's kind of good. And I'm supporting it because I have one. Smug prick. How smug of a prick am I? Yeah. But anyway, mates, as I said, that was it. Now, a few remarks that I want to add in the end there before we actually finish on 100%. And I've noticed that I tend to say, oh, in the end, no, let's go. Just to add, and we're finished. Bye, guys. But did I mention? And I know that. But the thing I want to add is that I do not think that the bachelor experience is diminished based on how I've been talking about it. It's just that based on my plan, so to say, right now, is that I'm going to take another degree and then another degree after that, and then probably another degree after that. It's that I considered this bachelor degree to be more of a stepping stone than a finishing point, which is why I didn't celebrate it as an end point, but more like yeah, it's good. But that's not the same as saying, for those who have this as their end point, to say that, oh, it's rubbish, how can you be happy about this? It's more like, I'm very happy for you, and I see the legitimacy in a bachelor, obviously. And I've spent a lot of time quite recently right now been talking about that you don't necessarily need a bachelor or a master's to begin with. I'm going to go for them anyway, because I truly enjoy what I'm doing, right? I enjoy studying. I really believe it's funny to do. I get a joy, I get a kick out of it. But for those of you who don't, then you shouldn't do it. But the bachelor degree that we took, it's good. It's a competent degree. It shows off a lot of character. It shows off a lot of growth. It shows off that you know the things that you say that you know. I would know because I took one. But for me, it's a stepping stone. Yeah, that's just the one thing that I wanted to kind of clarify, because I still think that wasn't clear in my graduation video, because I was so up and running. I was all over the place. I was like, what is this happening? And as I said, even if you listen to this podcast and you come all the way to the end, congratulations, by the way. Small clap for you, sir or madam, or fire truck or whatever. Wow, that was so insensitive. Or was it? Good question. What I'm trying to say is that I've also presented the reasonable way I would have gone about living my life, probably, if I hadn't taken a bachelor degree. And I'm sure that I would be really happy with that as well, and gain further insights to life and further experiences that I will now never encounter, just based on that I've done a degree, and now I will watch things from a different perspective than if I didn't have one. So it's equally as legitimate to not have a bachelor's degree or a master's or a PhD, any form of university degree, as it is to have one. You can be equally as happy anyway, if not happier, right? And as an economist, I have an educated opinion as of now. Sounds terrifying, but it's true. Especially some of the people I know have an educated opinion, and that is horrifying based on some of the views that they have, or it's really amazing as well based on some of my friends. But you always tend to view your friends' jokes as a bit too serious, and that's what I'm basing that on. It's nothing serious, right? But as someone who has an educated opinion, yeah, I can say that for all eternity, it feels like. Society needs people who aren't as educated as well, even though there is a clear, not linear, but very closely related relationship of progress and a positive relationship between an educated workforce and productiveness of set economy or whatever, I would still argue that the economy would fall in on itself if we do not have people who are less educated than others, which will probably always be the case, because if everybody got a bachelor, then that would be the social norm, and then the people who wanted to distinguish themselves got a master's, and then if everybody started taking a master's, people who wanted to distinguish themselves would get a PhD. See where this is going? Then they would be a professor, then they would study forever, and then society would stop. So it's better that we have a staple of, stop now and let's keep it like this. Not because I want less competition that's younger than me in the future. That's not at all what I'm saying, even though that's kind of what is being implied here. But I'm really trying to be as correct as I can here. But what I'm trying to say is that if you want to do a bachelor, master's, PhD, whatever you want, right, a doctoral degree, write your dissertation, be happy with that, then you should absolutely do that. Don't let anything hold you back from doing that if you do have the option to do it. Or if you don't, then try to create it if you really want to. But if you do not want to, then there's nothing wrong with not doing it, I'd say. That's just my personal opinion. So, now I'm finally going to end this. Yes, it's true. If you had any comments about this, if you agreed, if you disagreed, please leave that down in the comment section below, and I will try to interact to the best of my ability. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. If you didn't, well, leave a dislike. Show it off. Flaunt that power of yours that you have as a listener. I hope I'm not saying a viewer, because I'm probably just going to add a still picture to this. So I'm sorry if you watched the still picture for all of the time that this has been running. Let's see how long it's been running as of now. Wow, 1.5 hours. I really hope you haven't been watching a still picture for 1.5 hours. If so, I'm really sorry. I should have thrown in some visual stuff for you. Anyway, for those of you who are just listening, have a nice one, mates, and I'll see you tomorrow. And if we're talking podcast form, probably really soon, because I'm doing 2 now in June, because I skipped one in May. Have a nice one, mates. See you.